Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
The roadside motel sign burned brightly in the night, attracting the occasional mote and the occasional traveler. Limp Cucumber, Matt read the name of the motel, raising his whitish eyebrows in confusion. Who came up with such a name? However, this was the only overnight stay for hundreds of miles around, and there was little choice. The man left his car in the parking lot and, loudly slamming a gymming door, walked towards a building towering in the darkness, hidden behind a veil of rain. When Matt reached the door to the hall, there was not a single dry thread left on him. At the reception he was met, as expected in such establishments, by a half-drunk, shabby-looking old man, a typical American hillbilly. He glanced at the newcomer and, spitting directly on the plank floor, drawled in a creaky voice, "There are no seats." But no places. Matt turned around, looking out the window at the sheet of rain standing like a wall. Going anywhere else in such conditions would be suicide. Is there at least a bar here? He exhaled tiredly. The old man, without saying a word, nodded towards the lonely, shabby door and stared at some dirty newspaper. Shrugging his shoulders, the unfortunate guest crossed the small hall and pushed the creaky door, intending to drink a couple of glasses of scotch and then spend the night in the car. Of course, the prospects are dubious. However, anything is better than spending the night on a rickety three-legged stool at the bar. The bar greeted Matt with the muted light of red lamps and muffled blues sounding from an ancient music player, only miraculously preserved in this god-forsaken place. Surprisingly, it was not as disgusting as the man had expected. It was clean, although shabby. The soft light and pleasant music inspired confidence. The bartender, a thin middle-aged man with disheveled graying hair, was sober and wiping washed glasses with a clean rag. In addition, there was a young pretty girl sitting at the bar, although she was just as wet as Matt, ticking her long red hair, which had become dark from the water, behind her ears. She thoughtfully dangled the contents of her glass with a straw. Talking in a low voice about something with the bartender, Matt walked up to the bar. "What kind of whiskey do you have?" the man asked, fishing his wallet out of his pocket. "There are better ones. There are worse ones." The bartender grinned, putting clean glasses aside. "Let's do better." Matt smiled in response and introduced himself. They would have to sit for a long time, so the man intended to pass the time by talking with those whom he saw for the first and last time. "Lydia," the girl smiled, straightening her wet hair. "Tom," the bartender said in a pleasant, hoarse voice, placing a glass of golden whiskey and several ice cubes on the bar counter. Meanwhile, Lydia and Tom continued their conversation. "It's true. That's exactly how it happened." The girl shrugged, taking a sip from her glass. "Believe it or not." "Well, no," Tom grinned, wiping the bar counter. "As long as I lived there, I never heard anything like this. I'd rather believe Smith's stories about a pack of bloodthirsty zombie kittens." "What are we talking about?" Matt asked, taking a couple of sips of whiskey, which, in fact, turned out to be not so better. "Yes, we used to live in the same city, literally a couple of blocks from each other. The weather is not great, so we decided, like on hikes, to tell scary stories associated with our city." "Well, do you know any scary stories, Matt?" "Both of us have already exhausted our supply." The man ran his hand through his hair and thought. "I heard a story," he said thoughtfully, taking another sip. "When I was little, I heard from the neighboring boys that there was another one under our city, a mirror copy of what was above the ground underground. The only difference being that they walked there upside down, and instead of the sky there was solid rock. There is no oxygen there at all, but those who inhabit this city do not need air, because the dead live there. The boys and I dreamed of being in this city, walking the streets below us, visiting dead relatives. We even found out how to get to this city. We read in some dubious books on the day of the summer solstice you need to go through a door underwater. But once in the city of the dead, you can stay there, as in all fairy tales, only until midnight. Otherwise you will remain there forever." For several years, probably 6 years in a row, my friends and I were all looking for this door, probably diving into all the bodies of water in our city, checking absolutely everything: rivers, ponds, lakes, even pools and fountains. Naturally, we found nothing. Over time, everything was forgotten, but sometimes I remember my childhood, peering into the muddy water of the river near my house. This day is just today. The man's gaze became clouded with memories. He extended his hand forward, as if he wanted to touch the surface of the water. But, having come to his senses, he pulled himself together and drained his glass in one fell swoop. Matt looked around at his interlocutors, waiting for comments. However, to his surprise, they looked very alarmed. The Rag and Tom's hand stopped moving steadily along the bar counter, and Lydia turned pale. "What city do you say you're from?" "I'm from Stapleton." "And what?" The bartender and the girl looked at each other. "We're from there too, Guy. But they left after one incident. I'm about 4 years old, and Lydia is already 30 years old." Matt froze and looked in bewilderment at the pale, frightened girl, still very young. "You won't give her more than 20. Then he turned his gaze to the alarmed Tom. "Boy," he muttered, "looks like you found that door." In one moment, Matt understood everything. He found what he had been looking for so long. Only he thought that the door would certainly be in a pond, but here, under rain. Who would have thought? All three, as if on cue, turned to look at the large wall clock. The second hand ticked loudly. 3, 2, 1, midnight. The young man suddenly fell from his chair, clutching his throat. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room, and Matt began to look like a fish thrown ashore. My eyes got dark. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The girl and the bartender carefully dragged the unconscious Guy onto a worn leather sofa. Lydia sighed and brushed Matt's wet bangs away from his forehead. "It's kind of sad," she said, settling the Guy's head on her knees and starting to rub his temples. His childhood dream came true, but he was not at all ready for it. "If I had known, Lydia, I would have driven him back as soon as I saw him. I didn't think he was on top." Tom allowed himself to touch the alcohol, sitting down restlessly next to him. "Don't worry, he'll settle down here. In the end, I see absolutely no difference in life before and after death. You just miss the sky." "Darling, will you be there soon?" "Just a second, dear Elsa. Wait, I'll wash my face now and come straight to you." The seal, in the shape of initials carved into his chest, burned madly. The cold water with which Arthur wanted to dull the pain did not help. He knew that she was close and would now do her dirty work. "We just had to wait a little. Arthur, where are you? Can you leave me alone in such a dark room? I'm scared. Come to me quickly and calm my trembling." "Stupid, stupid naive girl. Why did you come with me? Why did you fall for my charm and appearance? What were you missing? Beautiful, smart, from a rich family. Or did you not feel the excitement of adventure in the golden cage? Did you want to tickle your nerves by agreeing to sleep in a cheap motel with a stranger?" "Wait, Elsa. The tap is stuck. I'll turn it off now and come straight to you." The pain became simply unbearable. "Just a few minutes and I will hear you calling me to you with your nasty voice. I don't want to see the result of your labors anymore. What a coward I am. Why did I agree to this? It would have been better if I had died then." There was a quiet sob and a familiar, disgusting voice called Arthur. "Arthur, my boy, where are you? Come out here. Look at me." On weak legs, Arthur left the bathroom and looked at the bed. Sitting next to the murdered girl was, at first glance, an extremely young and attractive person. But this is exactly until the moment you look into her eyes. The eyes of an old woman, full of malice and hatred for others, whose beauty surpasses hers. "Arthur, honey, you did a great job today. You can't even imagine what a lying and vile asterisk 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 I just killed. I haven't felt such feelings for a long time. Watching her die, true ecstasy. Don't you want to share it with me?" She made an inviting gesture and began to squirm to the rhythm of her passion. But Arthur almost vomited. He couldn't get a word out of his mouth. But something had to be said, otherwise she would punish him again. I something. Voluptuousness gave way to anger, and Arthur didn't even have time to notice how she jumped up to him and grabbed him by the hair, pulling him towards her. From the force of the grip, Arthur almost broke his head on the bed. Pulling him towards her, she stared straight at him. "Oh, you puppy. How dare you neglect my affection? That is why I destroy such asterisk 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 from century to century, so that they do not overshadow my passion. Look at her. Look, I'm telling you." She poked him into the still warm corpse of the murdered girl. He literally felt the warmth of life leaving her. "Is this dessert for worms more beautiful than me? Do you want to spend the night with her and not with me? Answer me. No, that's it. You have my initials on your chest, and you are now my slave." If you do not honor your mistress well, then I will get rid of you, just like I would get rid of her and 100 others like her. Fool, although I died hundreds of years ago, my heart is still capable of love. You know, I used to be a noble person. I had everything a 16-year-old princess could want. Everything except a handsome prince, and I almost mastered it, if not for the asterisk who looked like her. She hit the cold corpse of the girl with force and Arthur heard her chest break. Those were the old days, and the young princess could afford to destroy an entire state by just whispering a few words to her minister. Daddy doted on me, and my word was equal to the king's. Surrendering herself to the memories of the carnage her army had perpetrated, she began to sing, as if houses were melting in hellfire. Sounds disappeared, voices were cut off. People who can't please the princess, you don't deserve her pity. Oh, what am I talking about? Yes, exactly. The war we started almost destroyed my kingdom, and the people, mad with hunger and cruelty, burst straight into my palace, killed my father and servants, robbed and burned. How beautifully my dolls and dreams burned, and me. Oh, what they did to me. It was painful, it was pleasant, it was fun and scary. It seems that I then lost my head, in every sense of the word. Smiling, she began to sing her old song again. The bell on the tower rang 3 to mesh announced severe punishment. All the honest people gathered in the square. The young princess is led to the scaffold. As soon as she finished singing, with one movement of her hand she cut off the head of the corpse. Shach-thring, and my poor little head rolled under the feet of the damned mob, only to drown it and my beautiful body in a latrine. I am. Ha, they thought it would hurt me, but I was so angry at that green-eyed fool that the darkness itself brought me back to life years later. And now, I take revenge on all the beauties because of whom this happened. But you know, she threw Arthur away with force, and he hit his head painfully. His eyes grew dark, and she stood over him. Darkness is an ironic thing. I can only kill those who are as devoted to their loved ones as I am. That's why I need you and people like you. You know, all of you men are the same. I don't feel sorry for you, and that's why it's a pleasure to torment your tribe. Someday I will watch you suffer in agony, and find myself a new prince. Nothing depends on you, but the more you fawn on me, the more chances you have to delay your unenviable end. Therefore, make everyone fall in love with you. Make them suffer in the languor of love, and wait for me to come. I helped you always know where I am. She touched the seal, and Arthur almost died from pain. Yes, my toy. Loving me is a great torment. But you must endure this torment and wait for death to take pity on you. And believe me, I will try to prevent this from happening. We would make a wonderful couple. You seduce. I break hearts with my appearance. Oh, what a pity that you don't love me. But never mind. With a whip and another whip, you will inflame with ardent passion for me, or I will kill you. You refused the carrot. Pray to survive my stick. A wild, heart-rending scream was heard, and all those who heard it experienced inhuman horror. They knew that something terrible was happening behind the doors of this ill-fated room. But who would want to fit in and help? This motel lived only with such stories. They did not surprise the local inhabitants. Water lovers, criminals, and drug addicts doing there. What a pity that they did not know that it was in this issue that the beautiful daughter of true evil exacts her revenge on everything beautiful and bright that remains in this world. I recently went to a wonderful city, New York. There we were accommodated in a small but quite decent hotel. The third-floor room seemed strange to me, because its windows did not look out onto the street, like everywhere else, but onto the stairs, which, in fact, I climbed. And, standing there, you could look into the windows of the room. The second wall on the stairs is glass, so there is enough light into the room. However, I immediately noted to myself that I should not walk around in shorts, not bring anyone, hide valuables, and curtain the window of the room. The first night passed quite calmly and quietly, because after flights and a hard day of work in the pouring rain, I fell asleep before my head hit the pillow. But on the second night I didn't sleep well. Well, I didn't walk for about 10 minutes, probably. Another very annoying thing was a certain insect that was hitting the ceiling somewhere in the area of the chandelier. Well, you know, like a large fly or a small beetle hitting a wall, trying to fly away. It's the South. There's still snow here, but here they're already flying at full speed. I thought, okay, we need to deal with it, otherwise, who knows, maybe it will bite at night. I turned on the bedside lamp, which was not very bright, but did not notice any flies or beetles near the chandelier. I stood on the edge of the bed to get as close as possible to the chandelier and see who was flying there. But then, in complete silence, the chandelier began to slowly descend from the ceiling. There seemed to be a place where the wires were connected, dust and a bit of cobwebs. The chandelier silently sank lower and lower, and my hair, and not only on my head, just as silently began to move in the direction opposite to the chandelier, trying to stand on end. Now you can see the hook and some kind of rod on which it hangs. Here is a neat black hole in the ceiling, and there, my brain, having received its dose of adrenaline, instantly remembered the speckled band from the book about Sherlock Holmes, and even began to try to make out something. Was there something moving there? Were the eyes burning? Were the teeth chattering? Meanwhile, the chandelier, having dropped a good 20 centimeters, stopped and just as slowly went back up, while emitting that same toot 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 that I mistook for an insect. It touched the ceiling, froze, and slowly went down again. Head and camera, gas, alien headquarters, NATO base. Who would need a mechanism for lowering a chandelier in a small hotel? Meanwhile, the chandelier stopped again, this time having traveled a slightly shorter distance, and was about to go up. But I suddenly changed my mind about being afraid and boldly grabbed it by the lampshade. DYDS stats. The chandelier and the ceiling touched again. But how? I'm holding her. Oh, so you. The riddle was solved very simply, and even a little banally. A suspended ceiling. I didn't even notice that he was there exactly like that, and apparently there were some ventilation holes or just the wind inside the hotel. Something to care from the upper part of the ceiling, and the stretched canvas rose upward to the main ceiling of the room. In low light, I saw only the chandelier itself and part of the ceiling, but my brain was firmly convinced that the ceiling was static and could not move, which means the chandelier was moving. Why she started moving only at night, I don't know, whether they turned on some kind of ventilation in the hotel or simply changed the direction of the wind on the street. But in the morning the chandelier hung motionless again. But even with the light on and a full understanding of what was happening, it all looked somewhat creepy. This happened not to me, but to my mother when she worked as a maid in a hotel in Washington, D.C., back in the 90s. She needed money. She was a refugee from Vietnam. Despite the fact that her English was not very good, her knowledge of the language was enough to work and communicate with hotel employees. Everyone loved her for her easygoing personality, and whenever rich guests or celebrities, like the Backstreet Boys, checked into the hotel, my mother was always invited to clean their room. One day a guest arrived at the hotel. We called him Mr. M because I don't know his real name. He checked into the most expensive room. The manager, as usual, sent my mother to clean his room. But when she arrived at the room, there was a do not disturb sign on the door. The man lived in the hotel for about a month and never let anyone into his room. But since he paid regularly and greeted the employees nicely, no one insisted. And one day he disappeared. The manager finally sent my mother to clean the room. When she entered, there was a strong and pleasant smell in the room. She didn't immediately understand where he was coming from. The room was turned upside down, as if parties had been thrown here, although no one had ever visited Mr. M. Mr. M. had not told anyone that he was leaving the room. In search of the source of the smell, my mother opened a closet and found a cardboard box there. What she saw when she opened it scares her mother to this day. There lay the rotting head of a young woman. Mom screamed, ran out of the room, and fainted near the elevator. When she woke up, there were cops everywhere. The manager later told his mother that the guest had used a fake credit card and the head belonged to some call girl. Mom quit on the same day. I don't know any more details. A police officer I know told me this story. He said that in all his years of service in the police, he had never encountered anything like this. It was about 5 years ago. One husband and wife couple's car broke down on the road because this place was in the middle of nowhere. There was no phone reception there, and they began to wander through the forest in the hope of finding some house or holiday village. But they found nothing. And when they had already lost hope and wanted to turn back, the husband saw something and shouted to his wife, "Look," and pointed to the visible roof of some large and tall building. It was an old hotel. They ran to him as fast as they could. The door was not locked. They found themselves the best room and settled in there. But soon they heard a noise below. They began to go downstairs and saw that it was a young couple who also seemed to have gotten lost and came across the hotel. The husband and wife breathed a sigh of relief and began to talk. What happened to them? How they got here, etc. So, 2 hours passed. It turned out that the husband's name was Sergei, the wife's name was Natasha, and the young couple's name was Dima and Lena. After another 2 hours, Sergei and Dima drank half of the local bar. Sergei thought that it was time for him to sleep, said goodbye to everyone and went to the room. Natasha talked with her new friends for another half an hour and went to Sergei's room. What she saw almost made her dump her breakfast on the floor. There was blood smeared all over the room, and the headless body of her husband lay on the floor in front of the bedroom. But what really shocked her was what she saw in the bathroom. Sergei's head was placed on a wooden stake, and "You're next" was written in blood on the wall. Natasha ran out of the room screaming and rushed downstairs. She told Dima and Lena what happened. They were horrified when they heard this. And suddenly they heard a creak. All three turned and saw a large, tall silhouette. They thought it was the owner of the hotel. But then it came closer. No, it was not a person. It was that terrible with huge claws. In one hand this creature had an axe, and in the other a wooden stake, exactly the same one on which Sergei's head was mounted. They all screamed and ran. But Dima and Lena did not have time to reach the exit, and the creature grabbed them and dragged them deeper into the hotel. Natasha ran out of the hotel and looked back at the window. She saw a very scary head of this terrible creature looking out. But she didn't run far because turning her head towards the window, she tripped over a root, hit her head and lost consciousness. She woke up tied to a wooden structure. That creature approached her and pointed to the corpses of Dima and Lena. Their heads, just like Sergei's, were torn off and impaled on a stake. And in the floor there would be an inscription, "You're next," and as soon as she turned her head back, the creature hit her with razor-sharp claws and tore off her head and impaled her on a stake. The police ran up to the scream and were called by the relatives of the victims, who did not reach them and did not answer their phones. The police entered the hotel and saw this bloody sight. Then they heard a creak behind them. They turned around and screamed. 2 police officers who remained outside heard the scream and ran into the hotel. Further from the words of the policemen, since those policemen did not contact them, they sent me and my colleague. When we arrived at the scene of the murder, there was no hotel there, and the corpses of the policemen were planted on trees. It turned out that one of them was alive since the branch did not affect important organs. Take him to hospital, and he told us how it all happened. But we replied that there was no hotel there. And if you see an old hotel somewhere, do not enter it under any circumstances. We had been driving for more than 2 days on a broken road. We felt very tired in our bodies. Only the peals of thunder kept us from falling asleep. I forced myself to believe that somewhere there would be a road cafe, or better yet, some simple motel. There were practically no cars. Just a week ago I spoke at a conference on information security, and now I'm traveling in a smoky, domestically produced iron box. We haven't talked to Dima since the morning. It's all fatigue. I had already forgotten his jokes about our boss's giant buttocks. He compared them to either an aircraft carrier or a nuclear submarine. From time to time he lazily turned his head and looked to see if I had fallen asleep. Drowsiness came upon us more and more. At that moment I didn't dream of wealth and a wife, a Playboy magazine model. I just wanted a warm bed and a hot lunch. In the distance I noticed a rather large motel stand. It was illegibly written on it, "Welcome to Eden." We drove into a courtyard enclosed by a brick fence. While Dima was parking the car, I headed into Eden itself. Inside, heavenly beauties and fountains filled with goodness were not waiting for me. Cracks awaited me, very deep cracks on the walls. There was a disgusting aroma. The parquet creaked quite a lot, but it was bearable. At the end of the cracked corridor, a man was sitting at a table, his head tilted to the left. He was looking at me. I approached him and extended my hand. He did not respond to my friendly gesture. Its distinguishing feature was its dead white eye. Putting my hand in my jacket pocket, I asked him about a room with 2 beds. He reached into the desk drawer, took out a gray key, and handed it to me. He didn't tell me the cost of our room, but at that moment I didn't care much. At that moment Dima came in, all wet from the rain. He politely smiled at the person sitting at the table. The owner silently followed us to the room. When I opened the door, I was not surprised by what was there. The room looked like a homeless shelter. Better cracks in the hallway than this. The room was almost empty. There were 2 beds and a table. When we got to the beds, I started to feel sick. There was a big yellow stain on my bed. I don't even want to think about what it was from. I had to sleep on the cold floor. Every time I rolled over to the other side, a terrible creak appeared, which woke up Dima and me. I couldn't sleep. I had to go outside to smoke. Closing the door behind me and putting on my jacket, I headed outside. The thunderstorm outside ended. I saw the bright moon. It was reflected in dirty puddles. The cigarette was almost finished, and I went into the room. When I opened the motel door, I was speechless by what I saw. My feet were completely immersed in warm blood. Looking up, I found the source. It flowed from those cracks on the wall. My heart was beating wildly, pumping blood through my vessels. An inner voice screams, "Run from here. For God's sake, run. I have to find Dima. Only after that I can leave." I took a step, breaking the calm of the bloody sea. The blood became hotter, almost burning me. The door to our room was open. I stopped for a moment and listened. The sound was clear. It was crying. Quite crying. But I couldn't make out whose it was. I went into the room. Dima was sitting on the bed. He covered his eyes with his palms and cried. His body was mutilated and had many cuts. Hundreds of cuts of varying lengths and depths. In some places there were flaps of skin hanging. I walked up to him and touched him. He removed his palms and screamed as someone scratched his eyes. Frightened, I recoiled from him. He reached out to me and asked for help. He sobbed. He screamed. He called me. I didn't know what to do. My thoughts were confused in my head. They were overcome by fear. Someone hit me in the back and I fell into the blood. The blood was boiling. I didn't notice how it turned to boiling water. I turned around and saw the owner of the motel. A faint, smoky smoke emanated from it and slowly filled the room. I smelled sulfur again, but much stronger. His ugly eye glittered in the darkness. He took Dima by the throat and lifted him above him. He whispered something to him, and at that moment they turned into smoke. My eyelids became heavy, and I lost consciousness. I woke up in an empty room. There was nothing left. No blood, no demon, no Dima.